200,000 subscribers on YouTube, top 1% on Spotify. My guest today is Jasmin Laine. Let's get into it on Over the Target with BertaProudDad. Jasmin Laine in the studio. How you doing?
I am wonderful. I love Calgary. I'm like so happy to be in Alberta. It's I love this place.
Just flew in last night. And how was the flight?
Horrendous.
Tell me about it.
Every single thing that could go wrong went wrong. I witnessed somebody get kicked off a flight for the first time in my life. Had delays. We had electrical issues. It was absolute. I've never had a worse flight in my life.
But you made it in.
I did.
You made it in.
I felt so happy too after all of that stress and chaos and delays. And then I fly in. I'm like, there's no snow here. Oh,
yeah. Well,
worth it.
Coming out of Winnipeg, right? Literally the winter land of Canada. And then you come into Chinook land. But you're not here for the BertaProudDad show. Now, I appreciate you being here, but we're here for the Conservative Convention.
Yeah. That's very entertaining. Never a dull moment.
And you're speaking.
Yeah.
You're speaking. Is this your first time speaking at a Conservative Convention?
Something to this level, yes. I've spoken at like a lot of different events, especially provincially and stuff. Like I just did one a couple months ago for the provincial Conservatives. But something like this is like huge in comparison. So I can't wait to see how the media rips it apart if they grab hold of it.
Well, we know that's going to happen, right? We absolutely know it's going to happen, but that is well earned. And I can tell you that is absolutely well earned. And you deserve that recognition. Just past 200,000 subscribers on YouTube and top 1% on Spotify for podcasts.
Thank you.
That is absolutely amazing. And, you earned it. And I want to say thank you for all the work you do because, it puts guys like me out there to do this as well, because I see you can be independent and actually do journalism and media.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that. What's your background? Where did you come from? How did you step into this and got you to where you are today?
I mean, to be completely frank, everything that this has turned into was never, ever a plan. It was never a game plan. It was never necessarily a dream even. But I had started working in traditional media when I was 17 years old. I did a student internship and then ended up getting hired full time. And I loved my career for the vast majority of it. I worked there for 11 years total. And then I was on air for about 8 or so of those years doing various shows and all that. And I had shows too, like across the country. It wasn't like I was just in Manitoba. But I don't know, push kind of came to shove in my personal life, and I just could not do it anymore. I was so tired of having sort of like a boot on your throat or like being a character on a show that isn't super reflective of who you actually are. And I just really there were so many I think that's it, is that there were so many more things that I wanted to talk about that like we didn't have time for, or, kind of wouldn't be encouraged to talk about for the audience. I was working top 40 radio at the time too. So, if you're not talking about like Justin Bieber and Lady Gaga, nobody really cares.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, I do love celebrity gossip, but there was so much going on and I just really wanted to talk about it. And so I was in a pretty depressed state at the time, and I had gotten some advice from people who were like, hey, why don't you just start a YouTube? And, you can practice like your storytelling better. It will be beneficial for your career on air. And maybe you'll kind of feel that spark again on air by talking about things that you really want to talk about privately, where nobody really knows you. And then maybe that'll help you contribute better on the show if you're not feeling as excited about talking about certain things, And so I started a YouTube where I talked about mostly like social and cultural issues. And then it was maybe 6 months or so after that, I won a really significant award in the industry. That was like a milestone moment in my career. And then some things happened and I was kind of backed into a corner that I could not do anything else but leave. And I did. And I decided at that moment, like, well, this stuff on YouTube is actually pretty fun. And I'm going to start talking about actual politics now because it's really important to me. And at the time as well, there was really no women my age that were doing what I'm doing. And I know that I felt hungry for that because I always felt like I was so alone in my thoughts, and, you know, you kind of go with the flow and you nod and whatever. But I was really hungry for somebody like me to be talking about things in the same way that I currently do. And I started doing that. Somebody needed to talk about it. And that was me, I guess. And lo and behold, within just a few months, you know, that subscriber count kept going up, and more and more people were tuning in. And one thing that was really significant too is like for younger women in particular, and I'm no like crazy feminist by any stretch, but it is significant when there's like people like me who, you know, come up to me and they're like, oh, I'm so happy that you talk. Like, I think that, but I can't say it in front of my friends, you know? And so it's so special. And then it's really just turned into a beast of its own, that I never planned for, but I am learning as I go.
Yeah, it truly has, right? And the interesting part about that is it's not state-sponsored media. And that's really what is happening. I share my views on Facebook, for instance. I share them once a week just to let everybody know what my viewership is, just so they can see how important the channel actually is.
I saw you do one the other day, actually. It was a lot.
33 million views in 28 days is what I'm
crazy.
pulling. And that's mainstream numbers. That's what that is, right? And the same goes for you. You have people coming to you because you're passionate, because they know you're doing your research. They know you're doing the work that is independent journalism, independent media, and you're not state sponsored. That's the biggest part. And you know, the mainstream narrative and the mainstream media is actually failing now because of that. We saw the National Observer come out the other day, put a hit piece out. I call it a hit piece. I don't know what you want to call it, but they put a piece out. Basically what I looked at it as was a little bit of jealousy sprinkled into an article because they didn't get invited to the Conservative Convention, and now there's these influencer badges, which I have and my wife has, but you're going in as a speaker. I understand that, but they don't like the influencers being there because they don't like the 33 million views we're getting, and they want to discredit that because we didn't go to school for journalism. I don't know about you, but you just have to look out your backyard today in Canada and realize there's a problem and start talking about it.
I think it's really interesting the way that people kind of hold on to these credentials. And, you know, especially when it comes to journalism and media and things like that, most of them started very similar to how we have all started, like people in the space have started. There's also citizen journalism is a thing. And it's so interesting too, to witness, like there's so many stories that have come out that people like you and I will be called conspiracy theorists for talking about. Lo and behold, 6 months, maybe a year later, that's true. You know? And that's not to say that we get everything right 100% of the time. Of course not. But I think more importantly, it's like this curiosity and hunger to just know what's going on. And that article by the National Observer, and I did a show about this as well very recently, I would also say that it's a hit piece, and more importantly, it's not news. No. Like there was nothing about news in there. I deeply appreciated, that was sarcasm, the fact that they went and alluded to the Tenet media scandal. And, you know, they drop these little things where there's no direct accusation, but there's some sort of a tie-in, and they leave the viewers then to speculate. And of course it's negatively about people like us. And that's so disingenuous. And it's also the very type of media journalism that they claim that their credentials prevent them from ever having. Meanwhile, you know, I see people like that talk about us all the time in ways that are totally unfounded, baseless, conspiracy theories, just calling us names and whatever. There's nothing about that piece that was actual journalism. And I think it's pretty sick, if I can be frank in that it's, I think it's pretty disgusting to call names, like to call people who didn't vote for the party that you voted for names like that at such a grand scale on my tax dollar. Like my tax dollars are funding media outlets that insult me. I'm not okay with that at all. No. That's sick. That's absolutely sick. And it's not rational. It's not anything. And you know, you can take a perfect example here. Try Googling CBC plus far right. You'll have tons of articles. CBC plus far left. There's nothing. There's absolutely nothing. And that's a very good point, actually. I've never heard anybody say it like that, but you are correct. It always going after the right.
And I don't consider myself a far right.
No.
You know what I mean? And I understand there's people on the far right, there's people on the far left.
Yeah.
And I am neither of those. I'm in the center. I'm a centrist. That's what I am.
I've always described myself as a very classic libertarian.
Yeah.
Which nowadays is a far right radical
Absolutely.
extremist.
They've called everything that we are far right. And
It's
that's
such a shame. That's another thing actually about media that's very frustrating is like, it's such a shame to do that in general, because words do matter. And if you use words in a way that doesn't matter, that isn't relevant, or is like egregious, those words stop mattering. And that's also harmful. You know, like there's so many smears and insults that are just so casually thrown around nowadays. And it's just beyond me that those are coming from these accredited journalists, the national broadcasters of our nation who are funded billions of dollars. And then you have the audacity to come at me. Like, you know, there's this thing called competition. And if you don't like that people are resonating with you and I, as an example, and many others, why don't you do better? Like, I'll throw that one back at you. Like, you created us. Your constant inaction, your constant unquestionable loyalty, not giving a full story, being ridiculously biased, but not telling anybody of your bias. So then the average person thinks that that's actually the news, but it's caked on with a bias. Like, you created this monster that you hate so much now because you omitted so many details. You missed nuance. You didn't give full stories. You focused on things that didn't actually matter in order to create victors and victims in stories. And at the end of the day, people just want to know what's going on. And we have such a transparency crisis in this nation. And yeah, I will call it that. It is a complete crisis of transparency with our government, with our media. And it's so infuriating to me that you have good people, normal people who come from normal lives. We have sons and daughters and veterans in some cases, business owners, you name it. These just normal people who were so tired of not knowing what was going on that they took it upon themselves to do the research and said, holy crap, look at this thing that I missed that is so unbelievably important for context. And even to be able to discern a story on your own. Like, for the news is not there. It was not created to tell you what to think or who to blame. It was there to inform you. Here's the details. Here's what this side says. Here's what this side says. Discern the information and figure out what you say. That hasn't been the case in this country for a very, very long time. Like, I would argue the CBC, as an example, started getting a pretty clear left-leaning bias in about the early 90s or so. And then, you know, it wasn't so bad for a while. And then it really started to pick up again in Stephen Harper when he lost to Justin Trudeau, because that was actually one of his election ploys, was that he was going to be cutting some of the funding to cut costs on some things. And Justin Trudeau promised them more money, and look at how much that shifted the landscape. And then, to be frank, I also think it's such a huge conflict of interest for the CBC in particular to be allowed to even do any election coverage when one of the parties, the one that you're promoting, is a part of their election promise is to grant you an extra, what was it, $150 or $170 million. That, to me, that's such an immediate conflict of interest. There's no way that you can be unbiased or rational in those situations. And it just creates this echo chamber, you know, and it's so sad, and it's so immoral, and it's not productive. None of it is productive. And that's where people like us come in. Cause it's like, we want to know.
Yeah, exactly. I look at it like this, Jasmin. It's 2026. You know, I own a corporation outside of, you know, BertaProud Enterprises. It's up to me to make money. It's up to me to make money, to make profit, so I can provide for my employees, so I can move on with my life. Journalism's the same way. CBC, CTV, Global News, they shouldn't be getting any subsidy whatsoever from the federal government. You know, that's our tax dollars. And if you look at what's happened in the last decade in this country, we can't afford it. We can't afford to be giving journalism or media companies billions of dollars a year when we have an opioid crisis, we have mental health crisis, we have cost of living crisis, all these things that are caused by the Liberals. Now they're funding media to tell us that that's not what's happening, or it's not that bad, or vote for me, or elbows up, be scared of Pierre Poilievre. All these other narratives that we see every day with the headlines, right? And if you look at the last election, and how Pierre Poilievre won, the media really characterized him as the guy who was going to destroy government jobs because we knew we had too many bureaucrats, we had too many people working for the federal government, and we had to do something about that, which is part of the reason why I believe he lost his seat, right? And he even came out and he said that publicly. But they still go on with the narrative in the mainstream, which filters down into the people, their base, and it says, hey, Pierre lost his seat. And that's what they're running on. He lost his seat. Then you have Damien Currick in Battle River Crowfoot, what is the riding just right north of us right now. He steps down, voluntarily steps down. And now, he made Damien Currick to lose his seat, right? That, and the CBC's running that spin. The Global's running that spin. CTV, they're all running that spin and an attack at Pierre. All while our tax dollars are paying for it. And it's absolutely insane that we're even paying for this sort of thing.
It blows my mind, Chrystia Freeland, and I am being a little egregious here, but just to draw an example, like I think it's pretty fascinating to witness the coverage when it comes to Stephen Guilbeault stepping out as a minister. People, he's still an MP. Yeah, but he did step down as a minister due to these fundamental differences. You've had dozens of people due to some of Carney and like not being as feminist as Justin Trudeau was that have raised a lot of questions. Some people have stepped down as well from some senior roles within the government. And then, you have Chrystia Freeland, who she goes and starts working for a foreign government. And it's like, man, if the narrative against Pierre Poilievre is there must just be all of this chaos because the Liberals spent 5 years trying to get, what the heck is that one guy's name? D'Entremont, trying to get Chris D'Entremont to cross. They spent 5 years working on him. And he finally did it after he was really sad that he didn't get appointed the speaker role because he didn't win it when he was up against another guy who wanted the speaker role. And so he crossed the floor, but it must just say something so bad about Pierre Poilievre's leadership. What the hell does it say about Mark Carney's leadership when one of his main ministers, the woman whose son he is godfather to, has to leave to go work for a foreign government? Like that should be, if you want to have it balanced and relevant in terms of how you're discussing things, like that is a way bigger headline. Mark Carney, something must be so wrong with his leadership. She couldn't even work for Canada anymore, had to go work for Ukraine. That would be the comparable there.
Well, let's look at the headlines if the shoe was on the other foot. And I always like to do this, right? Because I call it the hypocrisy all the time. So just say the Conservatives were in power. They were the government. And during that time, they were sending billions and billions of dollars to a foreign nation. And the finance minister, while that was all happening, ends up working for that foreign nation while being a sitting member of parliament, because they did that ass backwards, in my opinion. The left media in this country would be losing their minds.
Oh, yeah, of course they would.
They would be calling foreign interference.
Yep.
They'd be calling for open investigations and inquiries, and we hear nothing coming out of them. So when it comes down to citizen journalism or the things that we do, we're doing, just by two of us sitting here at microphones right now talking about this, they can't stand it. It's already a conspiracy.
They can't control it.
They can't control it. That's exactly it. So let's talk about the last election a little bit. And Pierre Poilievre, losing his riding, staying on. I've backed Pierre like wholeheartedly since he became leader of the party. Really backed him in Battle River Crowfoot. Really looking forward to seeing his leadership review at the convention this weekend. I think he's going to come out with really good numbers. I believe that in my heart. But the last election, Mark Carney, and how fast the country flipped to an elbows up narrative, and how they fear-mongered their base. And I call them liberal boomers, and that's not for me to make fun of them. It's an older base, and we've seen recent polling come out that people under 30 are now moving towards conservatism because they want a future for themselves. You've seen how fast that these liberal boomers are voting against their children, and it's absolutely insane.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I really do think there's perhaps two things at play there. Number one, absolutely, there's a population of people who they, much like the ruling class who makes the laws that cause so much pain for citizens in some cases, they have a safety net of some sort where they don't actually feel that. Like they don't have to live with the consequences of a young kid who can't get a job at McDonald's, or who goes to something and there's 200 people in the lineup waiting to apply before him because our population is so big and there's so few jobs in comparison to it, or people are feeling hopeless and whatever. They don't have to deal with trying to figure out how you're going to pay for university and an apartment and food on your own, and work multiple jobs in order to do that while still being able to graduate from your class. Like they don't have to deal with that. They don't have to deal with wanting to buy a home and seeing something that's okay and it's about $100,000 over your budget and it's not even that great of a place. They don't have to deal with any of that. They're protected from that due to their age, due to the economy as well that they benefited from surely when they were younger. It's not to say that there's plenty of boomers who do have it very hard, who are very much struggling, who are very much in support of Pierre Poilievre as well. So not to take away from those people. I know it's annoying to be lumped into a group.
That's why I call them liberal boomers.
Yeah. But, and then I also think another thing at play is the fact that, especially when it comes to an older population and this is actually kind of interesting because it would be an older population as well as younger population who most likely is not voting age yet, and just kind of how the system is working through them in some ways. And so with the older population, being a liberal used to represent liberty, which was your freedom and having opportunity and being kind and successful and all of these things. Like liberty is everything. It's so important to human prosperity and to happiness and having it. And the Conservative Party was truly to conserve liberty, right? Mm-hmm. Like if things went a little far out in some way, shape, or form, the Conservative Party was there to help and to say that push back, and that's not great. And being a liberal back in the day, there used to be really rigorous debate that at times absolutely led to greater outcomes for a larger number of people thanks to their input. That's the thing that's so great about what our system used to be, is that there used to be debate and a lot of collaboration and things like that where it was just good. It was better for everybody at the end of the day in some cases. Of course, I'm generalizing there. But liberalism of, the 1960s, 70s, 80s does not exist anywhere in the West right now. Mm-hmm. It does not exist anymore. And I think that there's a lot of people where, well, I'm a lifelong liberal. Well, yeah, Deborah, when you voted liberal back in the day, that was a completely different party. Yeah. It's genuinely, by definition, not the same party anymore.
It's not. It truly is not. And I could go back and I could say Jean Chrétien was probably the last time that there was actually a liberal-like individual as prime minister. You can maybe go back even before that. But it's completely changed. And I don't think the Conservative Party, for instance, has gone more right.
No.
I think the Liberals went more left.
I think the Conservative Party in some cases has gone more left as well because the gap is so, and two, also the world has changed in some ways. There's things that used to be condemned globally that aren't anymore. And so you shift and you adjust. Obviously, you're not going to have the same party platform that you did in the 1900s. But yeah, I would completely agree with that. The Liberal Party used to be against, the big banks, the elites, the globalists, the technocrats, and now it's electing them as their prime minister. That's like a cataclysmic shift, to quote from Mark Carney. That is a really massive change, whereas the Conservative Party is actually still the same for the most part. Yeah. And there's lots of people who don't think that they're conservative enough. Fair enough, depending on what your values are, what it is that you want to see. Of course, that makes sense. But it's really bizarre the way in which being a conservative has been so vilified and smeared. And again, without reason, there's so many bills that people point to and stuff, especially around election time, where they'll be like, oh, well, the Conservative parties, they voted against this. It's because they hate your grandma. And it's like, well, no, actually, it's because hidden inside of that bill, there was this weird clause in there that said you had to give a urinary sample or something if you did X, Y, Z. And no, actually, it's because deep in that bill, there was something else in there that actually allowed the government to spy on your cell phones without your knowledge. That's why we voted against it. And that's another thing too and conservatives do this as well. So this
Yeah.
isn't party specific, but bills are so long and they usually have things that are hidden in them. Conservatives have historically done this as well, not to the same degree that the liberals have at all. And also, we have had the liberals for 11 years now. And they do this really good. And then the talking point is always, and you hear it regurgitated. And that's something that I find so entertaining about being in this industry is like, I always call it the AI update, where all of a sudden it's like all of the bots, and I do mean bots because I genuinely believe that there's a lot of people on the left and right, but more predominantly on the left, who are influenced by bots online, who bots will post a talking point. And you will just watch this ripple effect where suddenly there's like thousands of people who have never met each other, who live in different parts of the country, who are all saying the same thing.
Yeah.
Like that is absolutely some sort of a narrative campaign. And I don't believe that is, or it's not organic. It's impossible for that to be organic, for everybody on repeat to be saying the same thing at the same time and stuff. It's because you're hearing it, you're being influenced by it. And now you're adding that to your memory. And it's really bizarre and interesting to witness. But there's so much nuance and so much detail. And that's why like it is our moral obligation as citizens in a democracy to be active in that. And it's such a damn shame to see people who are doing the most basic democratic thing ever, which is knowing what they're talking about, researching it, being curious, asking questions, and talking about it with people. And then for that to be so vilified the way that it is, like the insults and the smears are nonstop. And I don't understand it. Like every conservative that I know, and of course there's wackos all over the place, but everyone that I'm close with, just normal people that are funny, and they have kids sometimes, they have beautiful families, they're kind, they're respectful, they're curious, they're very genuine in most cases. And you may not always agree with their approach or the way that they handle certain things, but like they're not some foreign asset, they're not some radicalized individual, they're just a normal person who's looking at their bank account and thinking something's gone very wrong here and we shouldn't accept this.
Yeah, you're right there. And I want to circle back a little bit to when you mentioned the bots, because I like to pride myself, and I've told my following this before, I spend 40 minutes a day going through my comment section and my DMs. I try to get back to people if I can.
I do.
And I try to respond. And I think I just owe it to the people watching, right? And it's something that I like to do. But you do notice when a narrative has changed. You do see it in the comments. So just last week it happened to me. And I put a picture out there after, and it could show you how delusional some people actually are. They started calling me a Russian asset last week. And it was very common over all platforms, and it was happening for multiple people, and it started growing, right? So eventually what I did is I went and I AI'd myself in a private jet and said I was going to Russia to see my handler.
I know, I was so jealous. I wanted to be in a private jet.
Right, exactly. So, but people believed it.
Yeah.
People actually thought, and they were gloating, saying, I told you, he's a Russian asset. I told you this is going to happen. Not even thinking for 2 seconds to think and reflect. If this guy was actually a Russian asset, would he post a picture in his private jet and tell you all that he was going to Russia? This is literally how much hatred they have for us and how quick they are to have a gotcha moment. And then the bots do control that narrative. It is absolute proof of that.
Yeah, I agree with that full-heartedly. And also I think it's something too where the algorithms reward reaction and intensity. They don't necessarily reward, critical thinking, being calm, taking a moment to pause. And so I think that what we're witnessing with the advancement of social media platforms and all of that, which is very recent, that there's a lot of people where they're growing up and they're being heavily influenced in a way where it's like, it doesn't actually matter if you know what you're talking about. Just react as strong, harsh, fierce as you possibly can, and you will get attention in some way, shape, or form. It really is. That's why for me, like, people say some of the nastiest stuff ever, and I'm like, I just don't care. Like I live a really beautiful, happy life that I've worked so incredibly hard to maintain and achieve. And like, I'm not I'm not as bored as you are, you know, like somebody who's just writing something vicious in a comment section, because it literally gives them a serotonin hit when they do it, because they're like,
Yeah.
and so it is so psychological, the way that technology has morphed into the digital realm, and how we consume news, how we discuss news, how we think in general, subconsciously. Like, it has totally taken over these weird serotonin hits. And for me, it's like, yeah, like, I don't need a serotonin hit from you. I have one every morning when I wake up and my dog's licking my face, you know, I have one every day when I'm outside in my rose bushes, trimming them up again. Like, I have my serotonin hits when my nephew calls me. He did this yesterday morning, when my nephew calls me before I'm leaving town for work to tell me that this was so cute. He finally swam by himself in swim class without my sister in the water with him.
Love that.
And he said, I'm so proud I did it. I'm like, those are my serotonin hits. You know, I'm not looking for what it is that you're doing here. And I'm not feeding that machine either, because it's just such a waste of time. It's not, most importantly, it's not productive.
Yeah, you're right. I gotta get a cough out there. Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. And I think people forget we have lives, right? We have actual real lives outside of this. And I get it all the time. Get a job. Get a job, you grifter. That's what I get all the time.
Same.
But the thing is this is our job.
Yeah.
People don't realize, like, in my phone right now, I have 7 videos that I have to make. And nobody told me to make those videos. Those are videos that I've decided through my success on social media that are very important, that my following or the people who are going to watch, it's important for them to know, right? So that's a job, right? Today we're covering the conservative convention. I got to go do that. I got to go see somebody for a meeting before that. That is in relation to more media things. I'm sitting down with you as a guest. And then I have a wife, I have kids, I have other things I have to do with my life. They think that, us seeing you're a grifter or you're a Russian asset, like, it affects us, but you hit it bang on. And I love that. We're not bored like them.
No.
We are so busy. I work harder now owning my own media company than I've ever worked in my entire life.
Oh, same. I tell people that all the time. They'll be like, "Oh, so what's it like working from home?" And I'm like, "It's worse than it was working at a studio." Like, I'm like, it's not. I have 16-hour days that feel like they're 2-hour days, because I'm just so invested and passionate. It just flies right by. And next thing you know, I'm like, "Wow, I haven't eaten since lunch." Like, and it's 10 p.m. But it's something that's interesting, because it's passion. That's what it is. It's really passion, and you through that, you find yourself more eager and more excited and, hungrier to get the job done. And it's so incredibly busy and all consuming. And then on top of that, you do have a life, right? And I think there's, like, a lot of people, I think, have this idea that so many of us were just, like, constantly laying in bed on our phones. And I'm like, I only do that for an hour a day before bed. Okay. I have a schedule. But, like, I'm not doom scrolling. When I finish my show, the very first thing I do every day is I turn off all the lights in my studio. And I almost 9 times out of 10 take my dog for a walk. I might have a call or something with somebody while I'm doing that. But, like, I don't know, like, I'm out there and I'm living life and I'm meeting new people and I'm excited to live. That's the thing too. So many people will criticize conservative. You're just so negative. Oh, you're so divisive. And I'm like, no, I actually, like, really love people, even people that I disagree with. I still love you as a human. We don't have to vote the same way for me to not, like, I still respect you as an individual, until you obviously do something that's, like, way far out. And I'm like, okay, buddy. Yep. But yeah, like, I would say that as well for everybody that I'm close with in this space. It's very similar, where you don't like what I say, but that doesn't mean that A, I'm wrong, or B, that's a personality flaw of mine. Like, there's a beautiful life to live out there.
Yeah,
and
it truly is.
And I don't want to be sitting on my phone, bored out of my face, doom scrolling, trying to, again, get, like, that serotonin hit with every mean comment I post or any, like, ridiculous thing I say. It's like, that just, like, I genuinely, and I say this in the least condescending way possible, I genuinely feel very sorry for people like that. And I genuinely pray that they find something that makes them feel alive and gives them purpose and meaning. I really, really mean that. Even for the nastiest ones, I really mean that.
Yeah, I feel for them too, right? I really do. I'm I'm what you call the content creator, not a content consumer. That's what I like to say. And we need both. We need more people to create content. We need more people to consume content, right? But the thing is I'll see a video. You know, I was just talking to a guy before you got here today, and he said, you have to be one of the most hated Canadians right now. Everything I'm seeing is you, and they're going at you hard. And I said, you know what? That's completely okay because I don't see it. And he's like, what? What do you mean? I'm like, I'm not a content consumer. I'm a content creator. I do my research. I see what the story might be of the day or what I feel is important to get out there, or what I'm passionate about. And then I go make my videos. I don't go to see, you know, what others are talking about me. I don't care what they have to say about me. And I especially don't care if they stitch or duet or do something to slander me or make me look bad. It's just not something who I am. And he's like, oh, well, that's a good perspective,
Healthy.
Whatever it is. It's very healthy because if you don't do that in this space, I could only imagine how long you would last here.
Not long, I think you would, because that's the thing. It's become so divisive. And it's really sad that that's happened, but that's also happened because that wins votes. And more often than not, the person accusing you of something is usually the person doing it.
Yeah.
You know, and we have Bill C-11, C-18, C-63, which was shot down, but like is supposed to be, they still talk about it every once in a while, having different variations of it. Those are all bills that are divisive, you know, in some way, shape or form. And they're promoted as being like, oh, it's for us. It's going to be good for us. But what average Canadian citizen actually benefits from any of those? Yeah,
I think speaking of Bill C-63, I'd like to talk about that for a minute because I do think there'll be another form or version of that coming back very soon, especially if we go into another election, which we'll also talk about here coming up. Because the Online Harms Act is what they're calling it. So basically to protect people online from threats or any bullying, anti-hate speech, all that other stuff. But it really does affect people like you and myself. And I think it is a ploy by the Liberals because they can't control our voice. They can't control who we are as creators, what our opinion is. And they definitely don't pay us to, have a way to sanction these social media companies to, basically shadow ban us.
It's just, you know what? Let's even take us out of it. At the end of the day, let's say, because I do think that, yes, there's absolutely a lot of room for interpretation, which is something I've noticed with liberal legislation is it's very vague and that's likely on purpose. But let's remove you and I from that in general. No matter what, if you just want to look at the cold, hard facts of a bill like that, the way that they promote it is it's to protect children, like underage kids, from online harm. Okay, so you have this whole bill that has all of these other sweeping measures in it and a lot of government control, but we have laws already for all those things. So that's where I usually tend to like break that apart is it's like, okay, so that's what they say, but we already have laws for that.
Yeah.
And there's some provinces that have even harsher laws for some of those things. I was actually driving down a road the other day and I saw a bench post, like a bench, what are those called? Bench promotion
bench
thingy.
ads.
Yeah, bench ad. And it was actually about underage girls who were being targeted because like a boy in class shared an image of them that they had sent to them in private. And that's what this bench ad was. And it was a group of lawyers who that's what they specialize in is helping kids. And if you don't have money to pay them, they actually have access to certain funding models and whatever, so that you can get your case, like it can go through and that image will be removed from the internet. So not only do you have federal laws, but you also have like private citizens and businesses that specialize in helping people in those ways. Like you have the free market helping people in those ways. And so, that then takes it back to, okay, well, why would they even propose something like this? Then what's the point when there's not a single law that exists that doesn't help the area that they claim to want to be helping right now.
Yeah.
So that doesn't really make any sense to me at all. And then you start going through some of the details of this bill and it's like, there's a lot of room for interpretation there. But also, it's like, even here's another somewhat example. Was it Bill C-9, the religious one that was recently in the news?
So, yeah.
So we have that one and you have Mark Miller, Justin Trudeau's BFF, who's talking about Bible verses and how, because there's things that regard or that have reference to, a man not being with a man and things like that. He quotes Deuteronomy. I said that's so wrong. Whatever. You know what I meant.
Yes. Yeah.
That's a total tongue tie.
Yeah.
But so he quotes all these biblical verses and says like, yeah, that could be hateful. Somebody could potentially face charges if they used those verses in order to promote some sort of a hateful act or hate crime. When the hell was the last time that there was a Christian hate crime?
Yeah. And
in this country, like when? Like that's what? Like, I'm like, have you not seen what's been happening on the streets in Toronto, Montreal since October 7th? Mm-hmm. And you're going to quote Christian Bible verses?
We've even seen Canadian flags be burned at some of these protests. And not only that, we've seen churches burned to the ground in this country.
Yeah. And so I think stuff like that too, it's like when you pay attention to not only the details of the bill, the existing law that more often than not covers that, and then also like covers the crime that they claim needs to be covered and protected. And then you also pay attention to the examples that they give when they're discussing these bills. It becomes, and of course I'm speculating, I'm hypothesizing based on what I have here, but it becomes pretty obvious what the probable intent is. And I don't think at all it's for the betterment of Canadians, because if it was for the betterment of Canadians, you wouldn't need Bill C-63. You would maybe be promoting, better parenting in some way, shape, or form. Like maybe you would be promoting that, children have loving moms and dads who stay together, that it's important to fall in love and have children with somebody that you love. And it's important to like have personal responsibility. And maybe it's not great to have your 7-year-old on Roblox, like you would be promoting things like that to help parents perhaps like not be in a situation where their kids are vulnerable to that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And of course it's not always out of control or not always in our control, but that's also why we do have existing laws already.
Yeah, you're right. And I talk about this a lot on my channel. So my life is guided by faith, family, freedom. Mm-hmm. That's literally how I guide my life. So I'm a man of faith, and that's what like guides me. There's been attack on that.
Yeah.
And then there's in this country, especially over the last 10 years, and we've seen it. When it comes down to family, there's been attack on the nuclear family, right? Trying to split people apart. It's hard enough to run a home in this country. I can only imagine how single mothers or fathers are doing it right now. That's got to be hard for the mental health, and they're feeling the stresses of what's coming down from the government, from carbon tax increases to gaslighting by our federal government, and just the cost of living crisis that we are in. And that's not just a slogan. That is the truth. We are in a cost of living crisis.
I was actually watching the news this morning, and Nick Nanos was on CTV News, and he said, right now, the number one area of cost that's rising that Canadians are really feeling, according to polling, which of course is a small sample, so take it as you will, but it was like 58% was groceries. And he was on CTV News and he said, going shopping for groceries, it's like a punch to the gut. And I was like, it sure is.
It really is. I remember going grocery shopping with my mother back in let's call it 1994, 1995. Let's call it that. $200 would get you a cart, sometimes a cart and a half.
Yeah.
$200 gets you a bag and a half to 2 bags, if that now. And, I feel every once in a while, Berta Proud Mom and myself, because we're blessed, I'm blessed to be able to do this stuff. We'll be sitting at the grocery store and we'll just pay for somebody's groceries, and that's what we do. And then, we're not trying to be condescending or anything else. We know it's hard out there and we've been there before.
Yeah.
We know what that's like. So it's just something that we try to do to give back. But when you see the cost of living and the faith, the family being broken apart, then you talk about freedom. And that's exactly what this Online Harms Act is it's taking away freedom of expression, I believe, from everybody on the internet, everybody to be able to have dialogue and discussions, whether it be in a private forum, a public forum, or podcasters, or whoever it might be, because they can no longer, and they know this, control the narrative.
Yeah, I think, some people would hear that and they'd say, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist, but it's like, okay, fair enough. But so then what would it be? Because again, if you go through all of those other facts, it doesn't make sense what they're doing. It doesn't line up to like what Canadians are even asking for. Number one.
Exactly.
Like nobody voted for that to be a thing. You just told us it was an issue and you decided to do something about it. And then also too, it's like, it feels so impossible sometimes because they use such emotional language and they promote things in such an emotional way. And they do that for a reason. It works. It's historically incredibly successful to get a lot of support behind you, is to play on people's emotions, play on the hierarchies, your ego. You're a good person if you do this. You're a bad person if you even so much as think the other way or wonder why they think the way that they do. It creates such an incredible ripple effect in a really sad way. But it's so shameful, I think, is probably the best way that I could put it all. And it's just so unnecessary too. And it is for more control. There's no other, because there's no need for it, and ultimately, in order to discern information, to think, to form your own opinion, to understand or even start to understand things, you're bound to offend people sometimes when you're trying to get to the bottom of things. And that's actually okay. I kind of have this belief where, as long as your aim is always high and your intentions are really pure, there's no wrong that you can do, even if you really mess up, because your heart matters so much, and where your heart is means everything. And your heart should always be in a good place when you're trying to get to the bottom of things. And your heart can be in a good place while still acknowledging truth. And truth is going to upset people sometimes who have bought into something or who have been manipulated. But you need more information, not less. And this is probably a terrible example, but even recently with the China Carney Trump situation, Donald Trump initially said that Mark Carney said that he was going to be doing some partnership with China. Trump responds, he says, yeah, sure, they should get a deal, whatever. Like, well, yeah, sure, that'd be good for Canada. Mark Carney announces the partnership or whatever with China. Donald Trump loses his mind, says, we're going to put 100% tariffs on you guys. And then Mark Carney comes out and has to issue a correction statement. Whoa, we're not doing a free trade agreement with China. We know that we can't do that under USMCA, or as Canadians know it, CUSMA. Yeah. We're not doing that. And it's like, you didn't give enough information. And so people, Donald Trump has totally changed his tune. No, your communication sucked and you were not clear, because Donald Trump has always been incredibly clear. China is an adversary. Canada has also been clear about that in as far back as a couple months ago. Yeah. And they are an adversary. That doesn't mean that you won't still have trading relationships with adversaries, but you have to be careful about them. Mm-hmm. You need to make sure that there's proper security protocols in place, especially when they have been proven to be interfering in your elections for the last 3 elections, especially when they have kidnapped your citizens, when they have threatened to take hostage on ransom politicians, there's so much stuff there where it's like, yes, it is important to diversify trade. You are going to be dealing with nations that you do not fundamentally agree with or respect, like, or value. That is a part of the game, unfortunately. You have to be careful about those. The U.S.'s message around China has always been the exact same. They are an adversary first, and they are a trading partner of some sort second. In Canada, we have such a different approach where it's like, whoa, there's no free trade agreement, we promise. But okay, if that's true, why on earth have you been calling it like a strategic alliance, a strategic partnership? Mm-hmm. Why on earth are you saying, we have to diversify and this is the second best economy in the world? What a great opportunity. We're aligned in our values for climate change. China's not aligned in our values for climate change. Are you freaking kidding me?
Not even close.
The only way that they are aligned in our values for climate change is the fact that China produces 96% of almost all renewable power pieces. So like solar panels, windmills, all of that production is China. So I guess that's how we're aligned, is that we're going to support their government by buying these things that aren't good for our economy, that aren't good for our energy, that aren't good for our communities, that are killing the whales. I hate that about wind farms, and the birds and all these things. I guess that's how they're aligned. But it's like, everybody loses their mind over Donald Trump. Oh, he said it was good for us. And it's like, yeah, he said it was good for you if you did it smart. You didn't do it smart. You had less information. You were intentionally vague. Vagueness is not productive. Vagueness creates division. Yeah. And because you were not clear, because people did not have enough information and you were hiding it from them, Donald Trump's reaction, whether you like it or not, was pretty fair, because you described something in a way that sounded a lot more like a much larger partnership and friendship with China all of a sudden than what you had initially said.
Yeah.
So you need to be clear and you need to have more information, not less. That was the comparable. And I kind of went off there.
Go off. Go on a tangent. It's all good, Jasmin. See, I think there's a method to his madness there. I really do think so. I think we saw MPs cross the floor in a sad attempt for Mark Carney to get a majority government, which I can't stand, by the way. I can't believe we have a system where it's even possible for that to happen. And I don't care what side crosses the floor.
I'm the same way. You know what? People will say, oh, well, there have been liberals who crossed the floors and the conservatives cheered them on. And it's like, yes, there was an instance, if I'm not mistaken, with Stephen Harper, I can't recall which year, but where there was an MP and it was shortly after the election who crossed the floor and people cheered for it. Like, you know, like that has happened.
It's still wrong though.
Yeah, I agree with that
wrong
as well. I think that there should be a by-election every time.
Yeah.
It's cool if it benefits you and that's your team and you want them to push through their agenda. Cool. But ultimately, I don't like that either. And I do also think there's a really significant difference from somebody who, let's say you're a liberal, and this has also happened with the conservatives, that like a liberal crossing to conservatives, who is there, you've been a liberal elected MP for 2 years, 7 years, whatever the heck it may be, and you're, 3 years into, or even a year a year is still pushing it for me. Let's say 2 years. You're 2 years into the term of the government that you're serving. You're realizing things are not, it's not happening the way that you thought it was, the way that you ran under that platform, campaigning that it was going to happen. And you're feeling really disillusioned and your constituents are not happy because, it turns out that, and Bruce Fanjoy said that they were going to cut all these jobs, Pierre Poilievre was, and then it turns out that actually Bruce Fanjoy did. And so you're feeling a little disillusioned and this actually isn't quite what I ran on and people don't like it. And you cross the floor later on after like some serious attempts and tries and whatever, where you're just not aligned anymore. I still don't like it. There should still be a by-election. However, I can at least be more understanding to situations like that compared to situations like we had with Don Tremont, which no matter how the media likes to say it, is that's very interesting. And that was very personal. That was not for his constituents compared to people like Michael Ma, whose constituents are still protesting. And that one was so bizarre as well.
Yeah, that one was extremely bizarre because you can go on a conspiracy theorist route with that as well. He literally met with the ambassador 2 days before this all happened, the ambassador to China. We know in that riding alone, there was some interference things happening with China.
Paul Chang and that whole situation with the bounty.
Yeah, we know all of that, right?
Yeah. And that has also been like a red flag riding for a long time with RCMP and CSIS and everything.
Yeah.
That is if I'm not mistaken, and I could be incorrect on this, but I feel quite sure that they actually do have those like illegal Chinese police stations and stuff like that.
I'm quite sure that they are.
I'm pretty sure they do in that riding. Like there's been a lot, and it's really odd.
Yeah. So if you look at all of that, like so when it comes down to me in politics, and you probably think the same way, the power belongs to the people.
Always.
Regardless. It will always be the people. So just say I was a politician and the things weren't going my way and I tried to get a hold of, Pierre Poilievre, my boss, said, hey, you know what? My constituents aren't happy. I would actually go to my constituents and have a town hall and let them know I'm crossing.
Michael Ma had a town hall scheduled for a few days after he had that, and then he canceled it.
Exactly, right? Yeah. And it's funny you mentioned...
and it wasn't about him crossing either.
No,
it was
exactly.
About some conservative stuff.
Exactly. And if you truly are a politician out there, and this goes for every politician, if you are a politician out there, you owe it to your constituents with everything you do in Ottawa. It doesn't matter what it is. So if you're going to cross the floor, you go to your constituents. You have the balls to go to your constituents and tell them that you're going to cross the floor. And that's how I feel. And if a conservative decided or a liberal decided to go to the conservatives, I'd be saying the same thing.
Yep.
And because the power really does belong with the people. Michael Ma, let's use him again. If an election were held today under the liberal banner, would lose. And he is still sitting as an MP in the House. It's insane.
Yeah, no, it's deeply concerning. And we don't have enough published information per se about it. And so you end up running a lot with just theories and speculation and things where we can't prove it. There's reasonable doubt. And that's kind of how these things operate so well.
Yeah.
So, in situations like this, it's like there are rules and regulations, but the way that they're done they're done in a way where you couldn't actually prove it. So there's no case.
Yeah.
And it is such an injustice. It is. And I completely agree with you as well. If it was a liberal doing the same to the conservatives, as I said, there may be some situations where I can understand how you came to that decision. I can show some compassion there. I can get behind it. But ultimately, at the end of the day, always, The power is the people. You are being paid to serve them. You have sworn an oath to serve them. You are being paid by their tax dollars, substantially, by the way. It is completely unacceptable always to do something against your constituents, always.
Absolutely. Well, let's start landing the plane here. I want to talk about the possibility of a spring election. I want to see what your thoughts might be on that, because when we're talking about the 100% tariff threat, when we're talking about, I think there was a method to Mark Carney's madness of why he came out with that trade deal with China, and to, to the displeasure of Donald Trump. I think if we watch the last federal election, he didn't get his majority. He's tried to get his majority through floor crossing. Now he's going to try to fearmonger his base again for a second time, I believe, because he cannot secure that majority government. And we're going to go to a federal election, possibly spring, maybe fall. And we could be possibly seeing him fearmonger his base again, using those 100% tariffs. And I think it's a strategy to basically shake up Canadians' faith, I guess, in the system.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And, it is interesting. This just came to me. The shaking up of Canadians' faith, because when Michael Ma crossed, when Don Tremont crossed, and I don't know if this could have been intentional, but it's certainly a beneficial outcome. When those two people crossed, what did you have? You had liberals who were super hyped. And then you had conservatives who said, I've lost faith in the system and I don't want to vote anymore. It doesn't matter who you vote for. I don't trust them anymore. I've lost faith. You will never, ever hear a liberal say, I don't trust the system and I'm not going to vote. But conservatives have been so burnt and so disappointed and let down and insulted and shamed for existing and just wanting money and security. But you hear conservatives say that a lot, where it does make them feel really helpless and hopeless. And that's something, it's so tough, because I'm like, I understand. And I understand if you have lost so much faith in the system due to these things happening, that it makes you not trust it. It makes you not want to participate anymore because you feel like it doesn't matter. But, best case scenario, you keep participating and we get ourselves out of this. Worst case scenario, you don't. And this is it, And I would not be surprised if, to some degree, that division that has caused is intentional, or, as I said, just a very happy side effect of everything that's happened. Because that's very significant. And, even voter intentions, conservatives are substantially lower than liberals every time. Yeah. Like, the fact that we even get the numbers we do is shocking when you consider the intention voters and liberal voters, they're voting.
They are.
And if you aren't, despite, sure, you may not want to for certain reasons, but you should try.
We do this all the time around every election, right?
Yeah.
We try to encourage people to get out there and vote. Your vote matters. I don't care if you're left, right, center, whatever it might be. Use your voice, get out there, put it on a ballot, and then you can't complain. That's what my grandmother told me growing up. You can't complain if you don't vote. That was her favorite thing. So that's the thing. So the question is, what do you think? Is it going to be a spring election, a federal election, or are we going to see this through till the end?
I don't think we're going to see this through till the end, solely because there's nothing that can be done in Parliament right now. And to be honest as well, even if Mark Carney were to get his majority by one chair, two maybe, it is so volatile still. You could have days where somebody's sick, their grandma died, whatever. And now it's not a strong enough majority where you can really, really get things done. Yeah. And there's a lot of variables. There's also a ton of different by-elections coming up this year. Some of them may swing. We'll see how that works out. But I don't think we're going to be with him forever. I also don't think he wants to be here forever. No. If you look at his resume, every job he's had has been 2 or 3 years. And he's been appointed to all of them. So I don't think he actually likes this that much. I don't think he relates to Canadians. And if you don't believe me, just listen to how he talks to you. Yep. And to how he talks about you. Cause that's something that's really notable. But, I'm not quite sure about a spring election. I think the Trump factor, there's a lot to it. Having said that, though, there are still a lot of liberals that are kind of disillusioned by the Trump factor at this point. It's just been a lot of Trump and a lot of nothing. And people are catching on to that. So I have faith that that maybe won't be as successful, especially given the lack of action in the meantime. However, the strategy then would be Mark Carney saying, well, it's because the Conservatives won't let us. They keep voting everything. It's their fault. So if we get a majority, we can actually do everything, and I can save you. I don't want a government to save me at all. I want a government to work for me. But yeah, I don't know about spring. The USMCA stuff is significant, obviously. Potential Trump tariffs that are actually coming in, very significant. But I think, I've been kind of mulling this over in my head, and I think a fall election is more probable. I don't think the USMCA agreement is going to go as planned. I believe that there's going to be a deal at some point in time. I don't know when, but that there will be. And I think that a lot of people will kind of realize like, oh, that wasn't as big of a deal as we thought it was. But the reason why I say fall is because of the budget. So the budget now is once a year, if I'm not mistaken, in the fall. And I would not be surprised if he goes to call one like right before they have to release that.
Yeah,
that would be my assumption.
You're right. Because I do believe it's going to be such a disaster in spending this year because we have to. At this point, he wasn't able to get a deal done with Trump. He's scrambling to do stuff in Europe. He's the most traveled prime minister since I forget what year it was, but it's been a while. And, Canadians are going to have to sacrifice and pay the price while he sends an additional $2.5 billion to Ukraine. And we've seen that happen. I would like to see an election sooner than later, just so Canadians can go to the polls and, we can have it out. I think there's a lot of people who were fear-mongered last time that won't be as fear-mongered this time.
I agree
with that. So that's why I really would like to go to the polls. I would like to see Pierre Poilievre's team get a little bit more motivated this time around. And I've been vocal about that. And I still love Pierre Poilievre, love his team, still want to see him succeed. And I think they learned a lot in the last election of what the Liberals did, but so do Canadians. And Canadians have seen Mark Carney travel and really do a lot of press conferences and not accomplish very much. And I think they're seeing their cost of living increase. And he comes out with a GST credit just recently or last week. My wife's reading it and she did a video on it and she said, that's all fine and dandy, but what about the people that are still struggling in the middle class? Because they're one paycheck away from losing their mortgage or losing their house or their car or whatever it might be.
That's the thing though, is you can't really offer anything to the middle class because if you offer something to the middle class, then everybody who's lower income than that is going to be furious.
Yeah.
What about me? They make more than me? How are you giving them help? But it's like the divide between the middle class
is growing
and high class, whatever it's called, and lower income it's detrimentally, it's big.
Yeah.
It's like North Korea big.
Yeah.
And I say that, I know that that's like an intense example, but literally in North Korea, the people who live in the main city, lots of them have money, and then you go in 25 minutes out of the city and people are eating animals. Like they're absolutely starving. They're not okay.
Yeah.
And that's because the middle class was completely wiped out. Like you're either with us or you're against us. That's kind of what it's how it is.
I'll be honest, and I tell people all the time, I'm fighting to stay in the middle class. I am struggling to stay in the middle class some months, and it is what it is, right? And you just fight away, and you fight as hard as you can. So myself personally, I'd love to see us go to an election sooner than later. But you are right about that budget. I totally actually forgot about the budget being in the fall, and that would make perfect sense for them because I don't think there's a way they pass that budget.
That is going to be, that is going to be really tricky. And I think too, we had like Bill C5 and all these national projects and stuff. There's no movement there. There isn't. Like, it's not this amazing thing. And so I think when it comes time for that budget, especially, that'll be the moment where it'll be the reality of what about all these things that you promised? Nothing has happened.
No.
And we're actually doing much worse.
Yeah.
And it's not balancing itself.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Jasmin, this is like flown right by. That's what happens, right? And that's why, well, you know what? It was like watching one of your YouTube videos live though in my studio, which thank you so much for coming because I've been watching you a very long time.
Oh, thank you. I've been watching you longer than I've been on YouTube. So
there you go.
I appreciate it. This is really cool. Thank you so much.
Well, we'll do this again in a year where you'll probably have 300,000 subscribers.
Oh gosh.
And I'm really excited for that. But again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, what a great interview with Jasmin Laine. I can't wait to have her on in a year where she will have that 300,000 subscribers on YouTube. I know it for a fact. We are a 100% supporter-sponsored channel. Please go check out BertaProudDad.com to get your unapologetically conservative merch today.